what's up guys? Thank you very much for tuning in to the first ride review of YT Industries' brand new Jeffsy 29er. Let's talk about all the details and how it rides in this first ride review video. Let's go. Yes, so this is the brand new YT Jeffsy, the middle travel bike in their trail lineup, sitting in between their Capra enduro bike and their Izzo kind of downcountry machine. This is really YT's do-it-all bike, a bike that you could take quite happily on fairly challenging enduro trails, but still pedal it all day on slightly mellower terrain without complaining too much. For this generation of the Jeffsy, YT has opted to only spec it with 29-inch wheels on both ends, saying that it's going to be the best choice for riders looking for an all-around trail machine. They still offer it in a 5 size range, from small through to double extra large, with 20mm gaps in between each size to really let each rider get the kind of fit on the bike that they want. To quickly touch on the geometry, YT is sort of giving it all of the lower, longer, slacker treatment, but only to a small degree, to still retain plenty of the agility and yeah, just keep it well mannered, well kind of handling for a very wide variety of terrain, so it isn't just a pointed machine for either up or down the hill. And those kind of numbers are for the size large I ended up testing and preferring after spending a little bit of time initially on the extra large. The size large has a 475mm reach and a 627mm stack. Across the size range you'll find a 65-degree head tube angle and 77.2 degree effective seat tube angle at the nominal saddle height for each size. The rear end on the size large is 437mm, which then grows by 5mm for the sizes extra large and double extra large to 442mm. And overall the wheelbase comes in at 1238mm. So it's certainly a very balanced kind of sizing on this size large, with 20mm reach increments between each size. The chainstay length on the smallest 3 sizes, including this large, is 437mm, which then grows by 5mm for sizes extra large and double extra large to 442mm to better balance you between the wheels. And then the bottom bracket sits at 33mm below the axle. Important to note is there is a high and low position offered by a flip chip on the lower shock mount, which lets you steepen the head tube angle from that 65 up to 65.6 degrees, and then change a few of the other different numbers, including a slight increase in the reach, just to give it a slightly more, yeah, I guess trail friendly, agile feeling overall, as opposed to the slightly lower and slacker setting that we've been testing it in for the majority of the time. YT is offering the new Jeffsy in a choice of 5 different build kits as standard in their core range, but you can expect that they'll have some uncaged level builds with a slightly more kind of specialist parts package coming out in the future. To start with, they've offered the Core 1 with the aluminium frame, a Core 2 with an aluminium frame, and then Core 3, 4 and 5 with carbon fiber frames, spanning a $2,799 entry level price point, all the way up to the Core 5 that we're testing here that comes in at $6,499. All of the parts kits through this range are pretty damn reasonable and well selected. You get powerful brakes on them all and decent suspension, so they're really putting the focus in the bits that matter. And then some of the other parts are certainly on the slightly cheaper end of the spectrum, just to kind of give you the best bang for your buck, you know. At $6,500, this thing is pretty impressively spec'd. Fox factory level suspension, a full EXO transmission group set on it, and yeah, it's certainly given me nothing to complain about at all. For the new Jeffsy, YT really worked to cover all of the details, bring along some of the things that they've learned along the way from bikes like the Capra and Izzo, but also adding a couple of little new features in there just to really boost that performance and the overall experience of riding the bike. The biggest one really is the internal storage in the down tube. Certainly nothing new that we've seen from other brands, but in this sort of realm of slightly more price-focused offerings, it's certainly nice to see. And YT's really they said they spent 9 months developing this storage compartment just to make sure it was exactly right and ticked all of their quite high quality standard boxes. So on that cover you've got multiple different materials used. They really paid attention to the ergonomics of the lever and to making sure that once it was closed it would really stay put. And also they moved it away from being mounted underneath a bottle cage, like we're starting to see on many brands, saying that that bottle and its weight, you know, you can have almost a kilogram of weight on that bottle cage, can yeah, certainly lead to some of the hatches on other brands coming loose over time. So they really wanted to avoid that being a problem, and then made it a separate component, which obviously led to its own different analysis and stuff for the frames, but they said this was the ultimate solution that they could find. And so far it's been a pleasure to use. Inside there you do get a bag that is made with a neoprene material, so it keeps it relatively waterproof. I'm not going to say that it's fully waterproof, but yeah, certainly should keep the worst of it off of your tools. And in that bag, they've made it so that the kind of more hardware inside of the neoprene is on the outside, and then the softer is on the inside, so it should stop all the tools inside from rattling and getting damaged, but keep it sliding and making sure that it doesn't get damaged itself as you pull it in and out of the frame multiple times. Below the storage compartment, quite near the bottom bracket, they put a fake wall in there to stop anything from getting lost all the way down into the bottom bracket, meaning if you're on the trail side and you go to pull out the bag, it's not going to have slipped all the way down there. But they crucially didn't completely block that hole off, so water and anything that might get into the frame can still pass through and then exit out of the port on the bottom side of the bottom bracket. Other features include a tool mount on the top tube. You've got the flip chip that I mentioned earlier. They've opted not to go with internal cable routing through the headset. They keep it to this head tube port system, which is pretty nicely managed. It's certainly not quite as clean as we're starting to see with some of the headset routing systems, but it should make for slightly easier maintenance. And because they use tube-in-tube kind of routing on this frame, it means that you should be able to get it through the frame nice and easily if you go to route your cables. And then otherwise they've got fairly nicely integrated protectors, a generous down tube protector on there to keep any damage out of the way. And yeah, certainly they've covered all the details, but how does that translate into how it rides? Let's get onto the performance out on the trail and see what we think. So then, how does YT Industries' brand new Jeffsy Do It All mountain bike perform? Well, so far we've had 2 days on this bike in the Forest of Dean, 2 intense days, partly shuttling, partly pedaling, and really across a wide variety of, albeit very slippery terrain. We've definitely managed to cover a very wide spectrum of different trail scenarios just to really get the a good initial feel for the bike. But by no means is this a long-term review. It has only been 2 days, so you can stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it coming in the future months. But yeah, for now we'll touch on initial impressions and this sort of whole process that we've gone through so far. I've started off with the extra large, probably the size at 189 centimeters or 6'2". YT would expect me to ride, or probably most brands would expect me to ride. However, I do have a very short torso and just a super long legs for my height, which tends to push me towards a slightly shorter reach number on the bike. And then I have quite a playful style, and certainly I prefer to have a slightly more agile bike overall than just a pure stable plow machine. And so when I started on the extra large, I did feel like the bike was maybe a little bit unwieldy. 495mm is actually a bit longer than I've ridden for a little while at this point. And yeah, just in general, I didn't quite gel with the bike to start with, and it led me to asking a few questions of myself and of the bike, whether it was, yeah, something that it was my problem or something with the bike. But thankfully, YT had plenty of bikes at this camp, and I managed to swap with Frank, one of their product managers, and as soon as I did that, it was, yeah, I was ready to go and feeling much more comfortable from the get-go. So I guess it's definitely important for you to make sure that not only your height is considered when you're sizing the bike, but also your proportions and your preferences, just to make sure that you get the best kind of bike for you. So it definitely pays to try multiple different bikes or hop on a buddy's bike and compare the numbers, just to make sure you get the right fit. Enough of that sentiment. Onto how the Jeffsy itself rides, and it's safe to say I've tested the old Jeffsy, albeit in the slightly larger extra large size, for a decent period of time, and I really enjoyed that bike for its versatility, but it definitely yeah, there was times where you could maybe exceed its capabilities quite easily, a little bit easier than you'd expect for a 150 bike. And then there was also times where I didn't feel like it was quite as agile or as pedal friendly as I might want it to be. YT's managed with this new Jeffsy just to make all of those small kind of tweaks and refinements to the bike add up to a machine I was happier on, both climbing and descending. And this has been a serious amount of fun to test over the last couple of days here. Speaking to that climbing performance, I think YT's actually dropped the anti-squat numbers ever so slightly, and certainly the anti-squat drops off a lot through the suspension travel, meaning that when you get deeper into the travel, there's less chain influence on the suspension, and in theory you're getting a smoother ride there. But even still, if they have dropped the anti-squat numbers, the climbing position and just the general feel of this bike is still pretty nice and efficient, and definitely didn't give me too much to complain about in respect to the efficiency package there. And also with the general geometry concept, with the fairly low BB, I was expecting to maybe strike cranks a bit more often than normal, but it still didn't cause me any issues. And yeah, I certainly think as an all-rounder, this is not a bike that you're going to complain about its climbing performance. Of course, things like the tires do make quite a difference there, and the Exo Plus Max Terra Maxxis tires that YT has spec'd on this proved to be quite a good balance overall, still providing plenty of grip and confidence for the slippery, ridiculously slippery terrain that we've been testing the bike on here, but still retaining enough agility, overall lightweight, and fast rolling for the less kind of gravity focused descents. Onto the descents, and as soon as I hopped on the size large and got everything set up and dialed in, I was immediately having a lot of fun. The overall balance that YT has given this bike, with the fairly short rear end but not, you know, crazy slammed, and middle of the road head angle, middle of the road reach number for the size large, it just creates a very well-rounded bike. But the suspension package that they've offered here is nice and supple off the top. It certainly eats up the rough terrain pretty well and gives plenty of support in the end of the stroke as well. But through the middle, there's still enough, it just sits really in a balanced, nice space where you feel like you can still push the bike really hard. For a 145mm bike, I think everyone at this press camp was asked, we had like an initial ride on the bike, and then where we weren't told any of the details, and then we were asked to say how much travel it had, and I think everyone said it had the same 150mm of the previous generation, when in fact it has 145, which of course is not a huge difference, but it certainly feels like 150, or it could even be more when you start to push hard, because it's really hard to find the absolute bottom of the stroke on this thing. But still, you don't feel like you're wallowing. It just feels like a very efficient, slightly longer travel version of what it is. The balance with the 150mm fork up front is pretty good. A pair of 29-inch wheels for this kind of bike make absolute sense. And really, I just found that this bike is very middle of the road in all aspects, with no kind of real point to it. But you can still, that means that you can still absolutely charge on it. The spec has been very well selected. Super powerful brakes on there, which are a pleasure. Nice drivetrain that you can just pedal as hard as you want when you're shifting without it becoming a problem. And then, yeah, an overall frame stiffness with the wheel package that sits in a comfortable spot, for me at least, where it's still nice and direct. I'd never felt like, even through the harder compressions, that the bike was flexing and wallowing, but also that when you when you get onto super slippery off-camber terrain, it's still manageable. It just sits really in the middle of the road in a happy spot for a perfect all-rounder bike, which I think really YT is made with the Jeffsy here. And I think it's a bike that's going to be a lot of fun and a really kind of appropriate ride for a lot of people out there, as they're either do-it-all bike or just as another bike to add to the stable. I hope you guys have enjoyed checking out this first ride review on YT's brand new Jeffsy. Do give us a like if you have. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss the long-term review, where I'll get into the details of how everything holds up for the longer term. And leave us a comment, let us know what you think on this bike. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you on the trails.